we're back for part 2 because part 1 ran a little unscheduled, but it was amazing. It came out better than I wanted it to. So make sure you guys listen to part 1. And we talked about this a little off air about why it's so important to understand that stuff. Like, it's the why, it's the foundational reason. Like, Christina is doing what she does. It's why she's at where she's at, how she got there, and why she's such a good person, and why she's so good at what she does. And that, I would say, is like the foundational stuff that all of the science and everything kind of sticks better. If you're a coach, if you're a client, if you're an athlete, or whatever it is, understanding what makes the person you're working with tick is just going to make that conversation, the fluidity, and the teamwork go so much better.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why part 1 is so important to listen to, even though it's a little long, but it's a great conversation. So now we're going to dive into probably what y'all have been looking for, is a little bit of detail behind FRC, this functional range systems stuff, our jiu-jitsu, and then the strong is feminine application and remove. Yes. So let's review what the hell is FRC. Is it just stretchiness? Why is it not the stretching in a corner?
Yeah, it's definitely not just stretching in a corner. It is challenging work, and that's not to scare people off. But it's one of those things that, if, like, how many people, I'm asking, like, the listeners, how many people do you know, besides maybe even yourself in your life, who get up in the morning and just feel like garbage? And they struggle to get out of bed, and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to, like, wiggle around, and I need to just, my shoulder hurts, and my back hurts, and my hips hurt, and all of these things hurt. And you just accept that as new normal, and it sucks. And you just get told, like, yeah, that's just kind of how it happens when you get old. That's that. And that's what FRC is for. That's what this FRS system is for, is to make you, in your words, move well and live well. And in my words, move well and feel well, right? Hey, there it is. Yes. And because when you move well, you feel good, right? Like, no one wants to roll out of bed and feel like crap. No one wants to go to jiu-jitsu and think, I need to warm up. I need to get to jiu-jitsu half an hour before class starts so that I can do a warm-up to the warm-up that's going to happen when we start class, just to feel good enough to train. And I know people who do that are like, no, I need to go show up so that I can foam roll for half an hour and stretch and do all these things before we even start class, because they just feel like utter garbage. And they're like, this is what I have to do to feel good enough to train. And that sucks. And that is not something that you have to live with. Go ahead.
Big one, really big one. And I think if anyone can relate to anything, it's that. Like, if you have to show up to the field 30 minutes early, if you have to go in for your prehab to get your body ready, if you have to get to the job a little bit and constantly move around, like, that's what Christina's talking about. And that's the same thing I had too. I went for like an hour prehab before practice and this and that. I used to have to like foam roll all the time to then do my stuff. I just honestly show up most of the time now. Like, I do maybe in my S&C mind prepping the tissue appropriately. Like, I'm never just going to show up on like a really hard rock climb, but the weird stuff that I had to like excess time, it's non-existent anymore. And it's a weird concept when you tell people, like, do you foam roll or feel bad or feel tight or anything anymore? Like, no. Nope.
No. Yeah. It's so weird. People are like, what? What do you mean?
Yeah. Why don't you feel tight all the time? Like, I don't feel tight.
Well, yeah. And so that's kind of the thing, is what FRS is making you feel good in your own body and giving you the ability to move with the freedom to do whatever it is that you want, pain-free, with less risk of injury, and just to enjoy whatever it is you want to do with your life, right? And so for me personally, it's being able to go ride my bike for hours. It's going to jiu-jitsu. It's going and, working out. It's rock climbing. It's really, I enjoy doing a lot of things, but that's why it becomes so much more important to be able to move with the free move without pain, because I actually, I tend to choose things that are a little bit out of the ordinary and put you into positions that most people will never be put into. But that's kind of the other thing. Most people don't ever train for that oh shit position. And I want to be prepared for the oh shit when it happens. That way, when something goes wrong, because it's not a matter of if, but when it goes wrong, the damage will be and the recovery time will be less. And it's really about teaching you what you need to know to take care of yourself for the long run, so that you don't have to keep paying someone for the rest of your life, unless you just really enjoy hanging out with that coach, which is kind of the case for the coaches that I've had in my life. I'm like, well, I just want to keep hanging out with you because I enjoy, and I always get something out of it. But it's like, I don't need to pay someone to teach me what to do in terms of taking care of my own joints anymore. Like, I know what to do. And so, that's kind of the end goal with all of my clients, is teach them enough about themselves. That way, however long down the line, they're comfortable firing me. Say they're going to move out of state and there's one that does this work where they're going. I don't want them to be like, oh my God, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
I feel good. Like, I feel like I know enough to take care of myself. And it just changes the way that people are able to understand their own body and to understand, like, cool, if I do kind of tweak my shoulder, what can I do to help speed up that process of recovery, right? And that's been something actually that's been really cool during this whole lockdown, actually, is that even like all the clients that I work with, I teach them initially ways to do the work with minimal to zero equipment at all. Like, they might need a yoga block or two. Otherwise, they don't need to be in a setting. There's some more ideal setups that if they were in a gym space or something like that, they could use that stuff. But that's something that's been awesome, is that since I haven't been able to actually see any of my clients in person, they're all staying. They're all still training at home. They all know what it is they need to do to keep making progress and keep feeling good. And it's been more of a, hey, how's training going, versus like, yeah, I know, I'm sorry, but like, as soon as we can, like, trying to scramble to figure stuff out. And it's great because, with FRS, it's the thought process, and it's not like, do these exercises, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's one thing that's been even better about dialing in my clients, is that, hey, I know this, and we've been training it this way, but if we just use this setup, like, you can use your coffee table or you can use your doorway, and you're going to still get the same thing out of it. And it's one thing that's great. It's like, you can apply the thought process so that whatever environment you're in, you can still do that you need to be able to do to take care of whatever joint needs a little bit more love at that time, right? So that's kind of the gist of it, is take care of your joints, because those are the things that always feel the worst when you get older. Yep. And there's a reason for that. And so if I can teach you how to do that, then you're going to just be able to do more things. It's like you were mentioning earlier, the awkward, like, pushing a ladder up in strange positions, where, like, I'm short, and so I usually have to reach up for things on taller shelves, and being able to know, like, I can get my arms over my head and I'm not going to hurt myself doing that, trying to reach something heavy out of this top shelf or whatever it is. Or like, I get little kids and I tend to throw them. So if you're terrified of having your child thrown, don't hand them to me. But, let's toss them up in the air and whatever. Like, you want to be able to play with kids and not be in pain or not worry about hurting yourself doing something. Because when you get older, like, when you get hurt, it's generally not doing anything cool. It's like, oh, I've moved wrong, and then all of a sudden something hurts, and you're like, oh, that's not a cool story. Yeah, but that's typically how it happens. And then it sucks. I think, a lot of times, and I used to fall into this mentality too, of like, well, maybe I just slept wrong, or maybe I just did this. And it's like, with all the shit you've been doing for the last however many years, and then that one thing is just what happened to push you over the last little edge that your body had, and now your body was like, yeah, screw you, we're done. We're gonna now be an injury, right? And so it's like, if you can just understand that mentality to make the shit work nice, as we say, then it's going to work, and do whatever it is that you need it to do. And then you're going to feel good. And I love, it's about making you feel good in your own body. That's what it is.
Yep. That's, perfect. Yeah. It's so good, right? Move well, live well, right? Feel, move well, feel well, love it. You should definitely do it. But that's the idea. That is totally the idea. I think that's what I was talking about. That thing that makes you so excited, makes us so excited, is not, we're trying to be novel. We're not trying to be the next coolest strength coach. We're not trying to make the most money by charging premium, whatever. Like, we personally feel so good And it's not to get confused with this is what works for me, so it's definitely going to work for you, cookie cutter bad thing. That's not
Right,
what
exactly.
it's this feeling that comes from this thought process of principles that we can apply that works for you individually to make you feel really good and then make you do whatever you want to do really well, less chance of getting hurt, all that stuff. And we just want that for people. That's what drives it. And that's what Christina touched on. Really, really good. Another thing she touched on too, which I've been finding out just kind of personally, is when you can truly think principally and you kind of know enough to do that, you don't have to worry about like quarantine or getting shut down or anything. Because one of the things I found out is that a lot of my clients stayed with me. They like hopped on through the laptop. They had a comfy floor and a pillow and sometimes a small animal, and we were able to train. And you can get strong, you can increase range, you can do this stuff, especially with the nature of like isometrics, which is static effort against immovable objects. That stuff is how you get strong. That's just how you produce the most force, which is the most effort, which is hitting all these strength requirements. So you don't need a gym or a dumbbell or things like that. Yes, there's optimal. There are other things we can do. But as far as your brain and body are concerned, it has no idea if you're holding a dumbbell versus a kettlebell versus pushing your hand into a wall. It's only feeling challenge. Is challenge where it needs to get stronger? Okay, boom, get stronger. Is challenge too much?
Yeah.
Now you're hurt. And it's just, it's just this playing of that spectrum with whatever joint it is, whatever specific goal you have, and that kind of stuff. And it's really cool to see. I think when my clients, they work there like, oh, wow, I'm still feeling better in quarantine. Yeah, it's not what we were doing, but it's much better than I expected over a video, whatever, that you're cutting in and out because I do Wi-Fi down in the basement awfully. So whatever.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother issue. But it's just this ability. So if anything, from a coaching perspective, if a coach is listening to this or someone in high school or college, the investment in a thought process and principles is priceless. And for the $1,000 whatever certification, we'll pay back whenever, because I can hand you a box of Cheerios and a cardboard box, and you're going to train 20 hours a week, and people are going to find results. Because you can just use these things. Like Christina said, like you use a couch, a coffee table. Like, what is that I see behind you? Grab it. We're going to use it. And they're like, this is weird. I've never, I used an axe in my last kid stretch class.
Oh, yeah. I saw that.
Like, it worked. It was perfect. It did what it needed to do. It added load because I was sweating way more than anyone else was in class. But like, I wanted everyone to use pitchforks. That was my goal because that'd been really funny. Just also like,
oh my God.
Bob, stretch. That would be cool. But and that's it. So just thinking principally to use anything, to use optimal scenarios to feel really good in your body. And then when you feel good, you're living really happily because you're doing what makes you happy without limitation, without resistance, right? And then you wake up feeling good too. You're not like, oh my God.
Yeah, you just pop out of bed.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, that is why we do what we do. So let's take the listener viewer to a mini picture, like a little mini paint a picture, let's say, of what we do when it comes to like the process. So we assess, we create priorities, and then we might talk about closing some active to passive gaps, and then how that might apply to creating a foundational part that will work with the other parts well, and then to do their sport, their daily activity. So let's just paint a little picture here. What's a little mini process that you might do working with someone that comes into you?
Yeah, really exactly what you just said. So day one, if it's someone who has no experience with the system, isn't say already an FRCMS or something like that, like you just walk in, you're like, cool, I want to work with you. Great. So day one is initially of let's talk about what injuries have you had, how, like, what, if any, nagging things are going on right now, what are your goals, what do you want to be able to do with your body? That way I get kind of a nice painted picture of, cool, this is kind of what's been going on in the background. Because what I tell my clients is, when you show up today to train with me, what we find is just a story of your body and how you've used it all the way up until right now. And it's like, how old are you? Cool. Like, I'm 31. My body, the way it moves right now, is dictated by what I've done the last 31 years of my life, all accumulated to now, right? And so getting people to understand, like, okay, this is our baseline, and not to worry, like, we're going to just establish a baseline of this is what you're capable of right now. Cool. And then it's a conversation about CARs, because CARs, those controlled articular rotations that I'm sure all, if not many of your listeners have heard of at this point, is kind of the Swiss Army knife of the system. And it's something that I give my clients as their first piece of homework to do every day forever. And so then it becomes a conversation of why we do them, how we do them, what's the point of doing them, what's happening? Because I don't ever want to be that coach that's like, no, just do it and trust me. I want you to understand why you're doing it, because then you're like, oh, okay, well, if I don't do this, then this is what's going to happen, right? And they're like, no, I totally see that and I feel that. So we have a full-on conversation as if like I'm teaching them in the lectures of what CARs are, why we do them, what's happening at a deeper level. And they're just like, whoa, no way. I draw sweet pictures. I'm not very artistic, but you know. And then after that, I literally coach them through CARs. Yeah, here's my circle. Here's my little Pac-Man mouse. Yeah. And then after that, in the same session, I teach them CARs. I actually take them one at a time, joint by joint, coach them through it. That way they can actually feel like, and it's always really funny. It's always when we get to shoulders too, PS, that we do one shoulder and people are like, holy shit. And then they're like, ooh, that shoulder feels like certain now. And I'm like, yeah, wait, I know, right? Like, and then like, can we do the other one? Because I feel lopsided now. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, and then you do the other one. And then it's like, afterward, they're like, oh, I do feel better. And I'm like, see? And so like, this is why you do it every day. And so we have that conversation. And then the next day, ideally, in an ideal scenario, it's like back-to-back days. Day 2, they come in, and then we, like you said, our tests. And that's just a matter of me going through every single joint, saying, how much range do you have? And then we answer the question, like, based off of what you told me yesterday, say you're a jiu athlete. Well, okay, cool. Your shoulder has enough range of motion for just like normal human shit. But if you want to keep doing jujitsu, we're going to need a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And so it's then a matter of, do you have enough for what you want to do with your body, plus a little bit of a buffer. You know, in jujitsu, things tend to go awry, and people are actually putting you at your end range of motion on purpose and then trying to break you. So, you know, then it's taking each one of those and figuring out, cool, this one has enough, this one does not, this one you have enough, but you don't really control it well. And so then it's just saying, how much do you have? How much do you control? And then just paints a picture for me as a coach of, cool, here's what our priorities are going to be based off of what we found. This is going to be what we'll call phase 1 of your training. So cool, next session that you come in, and I'm going to start to teach you how to improve these deficits that we found. And so honestly, actually, a lot of day 1 homework, so now we're at 3rd session with me, is a lot of explaining. Because again, just like I took them through CARs to explain the how and the why, most people that I find will be in Pails Rails land, where we're trying to expand some range of motion. You know, actually, I've only ever had a couple of clients who say like have EDS that have a lot of range of motion out of control. So the process with them is a little bit different. But for a vast majority of people, we need a little bit more range of motion. And so it's then an explanation of, this is what they are. This is how you're going to figure out what's Pails, what's Rails, what you're supposed to be squeezing, what you're not. Because otherwise, then I find a lot of people are like, wait, what's Pails Rails again? Wait, what am I supposed to be contracting? Yeah. Really bringing it down to a level of like, you feel that stuff that's stretching, that stuff that you always feel stretching, that's always going to be the Pails tissue. That's always what you're going to be doing that's always what you're going to be contracting. And then the Rails is always this. And I just break it down like, because again, people don't really care about like, oh, on a sciencey level, what's going on here? Like, I do give them some of a baseline of like, this is why we need to hold a longer stretch. So if you're capable of holding it, we're going to hold it. If we're not, we're going to back it back down. Cool. And then our goal is going to be to work up to X amount of time stretching. And then it's going to be X amount of time working up to a Pails effort, stuff like that. And telling them like, this isn't a cookie cutter thing, but this is how it's going to work for you. And then that way they can understand like, oh, cool. And it turns into now me more asking them, like not necessarily on, maybe sometimes on day 1, like say on their 3rd piece of homework, I'll actually ask them like, okay, so what would be the Pails in this scenario? Because I don't want to just keep giving people answers, because then it takes the whole thinking out of it, right? And I think that's something that a lot of people get caught up in is, well, just tell me what I need to do. but I don't want that for my clients. I want to make critical thinking cool. And so I want you to understand the process and think, okay, based off of what I've taught you so far, what would be the pails here? And then I'm like, it's okay if you're wrong, but just talk me through it. And then so even if they tell me the wrong thing, I'll ask them to tell me why. Why do you think that is? And then usually they end up being like, oh, actually, no, it's this. I'm like, yeah, exactly. Nice job. And then we, that way it becomes, again, more educational versus just do this thing, right?
Awesome.
Which is always way more fun for me. And I think beneficial for you because now they're actually understanding that what is happening on a deeper level. And so then we go.
That's awesome. I always educate. I've been on that thing. That's more important to create a better session. And I found, and it's one of those things we talk about with our staff and stuff too, is the categories of clients. And there's the clients that just want to be handheld all the time. And it's not that we don't educate them continually, but we do allow it to be a little more handheld in that we almost like accept it. But I really like how you said right there with the little quiz and stuff that I'm probably going to start doing now. Because I can think of some clients where, and it does take a little away from the situation because they're always like, even we did like 2 exercises and we come back to the first, like, what did we do? We're like, what?
Yeah.
It was 30 seconds ago. Like, come on. And so
yeah,
instead of being that coach is just like, oh my God, I have to tell this person all the time. All right, engage them more. How am I going to engage them more? I really like what you did right there. Is really, really good with that. So yeah, I mean, just another prime example of some awesome coaching from Christina. And for anyone that perhaps is hopping on right now, we talked about CARs, PAILs, RAILs, like these acronyms that we use in our system. And Christina can correct me and give me some more examples. But a CAR, or this controlled articular rotation, is just everything that joint can do in isolation in all of its ranges. So if I look at a shoulder, I always think of my joint compass, which I used on PowerPoint. And like I said, you can steal that one if you want to. I like my little compass thingy. So imagine a compass and a little circle pops up in front of you and you have north, south, east, and west. That might be what a shoulder can do, a hip can do, right? It can come all the way up, it can go all the way behind you, it can come across your body and out to your side. And then you can kind of move it along those edges. And I want to see every single centimeter, millimeter of joint space, joint movement that you have. The more, the merrier, right? The more doesn't imply the strong or the resilient though. Like we talked about with EDS clients and stuff or hyperflexible, anyone, yeah, you got great range of motion, but you still get hurt, right? So that's our conversation too. So that's what CARs are. CARs are our, like we said, Swiss Army knife. What's going on in that joint? How much of a shoulder do you have? You tell me you have a shoulder, but then you do a little, and it doesn't move at all. It's like, you don't have a shoulder, right? Because you don't have all this range of motion.
Yeah.
And PAILs and RAILs, I have to give just a simple, if you're listening to this, you can't see this, all you do is like, you pull your finger back. That finger that I pull back, push into the finger. That is a PAILs contraction. The angle is opening or progressing. And then with that pulled back finger, try and lift it off the other finger a little more. Now the top of your hand is starting to cramp up a little bit. RAILs. So now the angle is closing or it's regressing. So a very simple concept to apply to anything. So if something is stretching, like Christina said, and you push into it, PAILs. If you're trying to go away from the stretch or come into the stretch deeper, you're railing. And these are just our ways of expanding range of motion, communicating with specific tissues, muscles, and so forth. But let's throw it back onto you. Why is this isometric nature of what we do defining when it comes to this flexibility, mobility, range of motion world?
If it's what? I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
Sorry. So why is like the active, right? This isometrics, these PAILs and RAILs. Do we find that more beneficial when it comes to this range of motion stuff, this usable range of motion stuff, rather than just holding a passive static stretch?
Sure. So when we're stretching, like there is force going into that tissue, right? When you're stretching, it is force, which is great, but it's passive. And in it being passive, meaning like that I'm using gravity or a prop or something else to get myself into that range of motion. If you only ever do that, then the only way you'll ever be able to access that range that you've now opened being more flexible is by continuing to use gravity or that prop or something to put yourself there. And if I was to ask you to get there under your own strength and willpower, it's not going to happen because you haven't trained it to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And so if you're only ever using those things, access it. But in doing the isometrics that we do, now we start to add in strength and control and control. And so now it's, okay, let's get this joint, let's stretch to be able to get to this range we want to get to based off just where we currently are. But then by strength training there, we're teaching, we're training those tissues, we're training those muscles, we're training all of that stuff that allows me to, one, be strong there to produce force, but also to absorb force. And so usually, like, if someone's getting, it's in the force absorption phase, right? Or as we know, it's like usually in an eccentric, that most dangerous part of it, which is partly one why we use isometrics primarily, and at least in the initial, because they're safe to do, but they also build a whole ton of strength. And they also teach your nervous system. And it's something that, like, your nervous system controls everything. And so if you can use that isometric strength training, you're going to teach your nervous system the absolute most you possibly can about that joint at that range. And it's going to actually allow you to use that. So say if you were doing the splits and you just are like Jean-Claude Van Damme and you just whoosh down into the splits. Now, can you actually pull yourself back up out of the splits with just the strength of the tissues in your legs versus using your hands on the floor and climbing and getting back up, right? Or I like to use the analogy, probably because martial arts, but if you go to head kick somebody and you've been spending loads of time stretching your hamstrings and stretching your hamstrings and just stretching, you probably have the length that you need in the hamstring to be able to, for your leg to get put up high to kick someone in the head. But the only way you're going to get there is momentum and not control, that's for sure. Because if I asked you, like, say if you, for those of you watching, you can see, so I'll try to use my words well so that you can visualize it if you're just listening. But if I was to be standing up and I grab one of my feet and I straighten my leg up and I put it way up next to my head and my leg goes there and I'm like, cool, this is comfortable. And then I ask you to let go of that leg, can you leg up next to your head, or does it just fall right back to the floor? And that's the difference in, you have the flexibility, you have the length of that hamstring stuff, but you're missing that control. And so what we're doing with those isometrics is adding in that control and that strength for you to be able to actually hold your own leg there in space, which is one, freaking cool. If you ask me, I'm like, like if I was to, like, I am not that cool. Like I can do it seated, I just showed you. But if I was to stand, like, I am not there. I am not that cool yet. I have some work to do. But if you could have that level of body control, like, can you just imagine how much more of a ninja you would be? Mm-hmm. And how much, and then you're actually, like I said, you're teaching your body not to just absorb force, but produce force. Like, imagine how much harder you could kick someone, because mm-hmm. now you're way stronger there than just swinging your leg up and using momentum. But you're actually used to producing force at that very end range of motion, which is where impact happens, when you actually nail the person in the head, right? Yeah. And so it's that much more important that we're giving active inputs to that stuff, because that's that's just the best information to give our nervous system that it doesn't otherwise get if we don't do the stuff actively.
Right. Bang. Yeah. And that is perfect. That is the exact thing I was hoping you would say. And it makes it very, very clear why you're going to see the training that we do versus why we're not going to be like, oh, you have a goal of, getting your head or your foot that high towards someone's head. Let's just stretch your hamstrings, bend over, touch your toes, hold it for 10 seconds, a few times a day, you'll be good. Right. After that should not make sense. That should not make sense. Yeah. That's a perfect transition into our Jiu Jitsu talk here. We mentioned a little bit of martial arts and how this training style is applicable. So just very in general, let's talk about at first why it works so well, how you apply it, how you've applied it to the people that you've worked with, and then again maybe some things about how the listeners or viewers, oh, big stretch, puppy. Okay, good. And how the listeners and viewers are going to kind of take away, like what's something that they can immediately use. Obviously going to see someone in person, that's where it's going to make the most sense, right, with the assessment, but maybe a thought process, maybe something to like to kind of look in the mirror, or next time they go roll, or next time they go to practice, and be like, this is what they were talking about.
Yeah. So with jiu-jitsu, it's funny because I don't think of it. It sounds really terrible when you explain it, but it actually is. I'm like, oh, it does really sound bad. But essentially, you're trying to take someone's limb to its very end range of motion where it doesn't want to go, and then you try to make it go farther. So and it's like, oh, that does sound really terrible. And you choke people. So there's that too, which is also a really funny idea that I realized, most people don't know what it's like to be choked. And that sounds really awful. And quick backstory, but one of my good girlfriends, for the longest time, she swore she would never do jiu-jitsu. She's like, I don't handle pain well. It's just not going to go well. I'm not going to do this. I'm like, yeah, okay, come train. So she finally did come train. And obviously I was partnered up with her. And of course, the first thing that whoever was teaching that day, we were doing a choke. And the higher belt always goes first. That way the lower rank can like see what they're doing again. So that way, like whoever showed it, they watched it, and then whoever they're training with is doing it again, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, so then I set it up, and again, I know it's day one, so I'm like very careful and going very slowly, and then I slowly choke her. And she freaked out. She's like, tap. Oh my God. And she's like, I've never been choked before. Like, oh shit. Like, I didn't even think about that. Like, most people have not ever experienced that. And I can imagine that would be really terrifying.
Oh my God. Human nature.
So anyway.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing. Anyway, that was this little side tangent. But so in jiu-jitsu, that's what we're doing. We're choking you and trying to get you to tap out. So either you tap out or you go to sleep, like your two options, unless you escape. And you're taking a joint to its end range, and then you're trying to make it go more. So whether that's someone's taking their arm and then trying to make their elbow go the wrong direction, or taking their shoulder this way and trying to make it go more, and then you end up with gross spiral fracture things. And it's just all terrible, but that's why we're in a controlled environment, right? So it's just so wildly applicable, like FRC and jiu-jitsu. It blows my mind. And it's been so fun for me personally since getting into all this work, that when I go to show up to jiu-jitsu class, it is just unreal in terms of like the lens through which I watch my instructors coach. Dog's like,
oh yeah. I have a barricade.
Sorry, it was really cute. He was like, oh. I was just cracking up because his little face was like peeked over your shoulder. It was really cute. Yeah, so it's one of the things that now when I sit and I watch this technique, like the way that I absorb the technique is so much different now, because I move better than a lot of people just because I've been doing this stuff for a bit. And so I think like, well, actually I could eliminate that whole step in this technique, because I don't need to move a little bit more to create more space, because I can just get my leg out of there without having to actually move the rest of my body, because I have that range of motion available, right? And a lot of people don't. So it's like, oh, do this extra step to then change your body angle to then do this thing. It's like, no, I can just do that thing, which is really cool. And so, but with FRC, again, training that we do is at the end range of motion. So for you jiu-jitsu listeners, it's like, I'm going to basically put you in an Americana gently, to where then we just feel like a stretch. We're going to train there. And what's awesome is, one, we're going to improve your range of motion there. So if you're that person in jiu-jitsu who anytime someone grabs your arm to either kimura you or Americana you, and you're like, holy crap, I can't tap fast enough, you're probably that guy who has really, to be honest, pretty terrible range of motion in your shoulders. Because if that wasn't the case, you wouldn't feel that freak out of like, oh no, I need to tap or this is not going to end well for me, right? And so what's great is when we do this FRC training, we train that position. We take that joint to its end range, and then we train there. So one, we're going to expand your range of motion there, but it's not, again, back to the flexibility conversation, we're not going to just passively stretch that now, oh, I have more range, because that's not going to help you when someone's trying to take your arm off. And we all know that if I'm trying to defend against the Americana, I'm driving my wrist back up into them. I'm trying to produce force there to kind of try to fight back. I'm trying to alter my position to get my arm back from them, right? And so what's awesome is by doing these tails and rails or doing this isometric strength training, that's exactly what we're doing when we're defending submissions in jiu-jitsu. I'm learning how to, one, absorb the force that the person on top of me is putting into that shoulder. And I'm also learning how to produce maximal force at that end range. And that's just going to give me more time to escape, right? It's just going to keep me so much safer than if I've never been in that position before. And so that's just with shoulders and why it's wildly important. I think that one resonates with a lot of people. That's just like, oh, that's me. I'm that person that taps immediately when someone grabs my arm. And same thing like with hips, like for me personally, when I first went to Hunter, I had that closing angle pinch, yada, yada. I also had told him, like, yeah, I can do De La Hiva with my right leg and I cannot do it with my left. And I don't know why. And actually, I think it was the opposite of that time. But anyway, I was like, yeah, I have no idea. Like, I just can't do it. Like, I know how to do it, but it just doesn't happen. And it drives me crazy. Turns out I had no external rotation in that hip on the one that I couldn't do. Surprise, surprise. And it's like, oh, well, my hip just doesn't move that way. So fat chance trying to use a De La Hiva guard on somebody that side because my hip doesn't rotate that way. And so no matter how many times I try to do it, it's not going to change because I'm not actually improving my hip to move that way. So what are we going to do? I'm going to put that joint to where you can currently go. Then we're going to train there. That way we can expand it so your hip has more range and more capacity there. And again, we're going to train it to be strong there. So wrap your leg around that person's leg and hold it as strong as you want because you're now used to producing force there. It's awesome. So it's been really cool with a lot of my clients is that the jiu-jitsu ones anyhow, is that I get texts now. They're like, my hips are so buttery. I was triangling everybody. And it's like, you know, yeah, that's awesome. You know,
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's just one of those things that, you know, if it's trained in an intelligent manner. And so like, another conversation is that, you know, it's something that Hunter said to me and it just really resonated is you're a human first and you're an athlete second. Mm-hmm. So we're going to restore normal human range of motion first, and then we're going to make you a beast on the mat, even more so than maybe you already were. And it's the same conversation that I have with my clients. It's like, look, man, I know you want to be able to do X, Y, and Z, but your shoulder doesn't move at all right now. So we're going to make sure that you can move your shoulder like a shoulder. Then we'll start to add on a little bit more. That way for jiu-jitsu, you're like, cool, I've got that extra buffer zone. I'm going to be way stronger here, all that jazz. And so really it just, like I said, it couldn't fit more perfectly. And from a coaching aspect, so if there's any of you jiu-jitsu people out there who are coaches too, and you're like, maybe I should get into this FRC thing, knowing jiu-jitsu to then train your clients is also wildly helpful because you're used to grabbing onto people's joints and taking them to that range, but you also have a different sensitivity level to feel like, oh, that person's arm does not want to go there, right? Mm-hmm. And so I can do it in a safer and more controlled manner because I'm used to what that feels like. And I know like what to do in case, you know, if something was to go wrong. Like I would always actually laugh, say if I was training Hunter or Hunter was training me and he had my arm in a position. I remember thinking sometimes like, if all of a sudden my nervous system's about to fail and I'm not going to be able to push and he's fighting back into me, it's already thought about how I'm going to get out of this position. So I'm just like, oh, I don't need that to happen because it's, you know, one of the things like as jiu-jitsu people, we're used to not giving people our limbs. Like we don't want you to have them. They're ours. But in this training, like you get to take my arm and it's funny because there's been times training where I'm like, I didn't realize that I was still holding tension in that arm when Hunter's trying to hold my arm there passively. And I'm like, all of a sudden I just like relax and he's like, oh, Christina, there it is. Okay. Wow. Yeah. We've long. I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
It's a natural defense.
Yeah, it's just natural. Like, no, I don't want to go that way, sir. Thanks. I know that doesn't end well. Yeah. And so it's one of those things. Yeah. It's just woosah.
Yeah. Do a little rock to get them to really like, oh, okay, there it is. Yeah, this is awesome. I think, yeah, if anyone's listening and, you know, is practicing martial arts in any form, jiu-jitsu or anything else, and that didn't convince you to give this a look, right? It just makes too much sense. Like I said, it's wildly applicable to getting into the ranges that people are trying to use force against you to make you tap out, to give you pain, and then having the strength there to fight back. Makes sense. Also rings true with the coaching because I talked about the baseball guy on the last podcast, or when this ever is going to go. He is a player development coach in the minor league system, and he works for the Houston Astros. And he uses this concept of understanding joint function at the joint level to coach his players better. Instead of being like, oh, that swing doesn't look good, try this, try this, try this, or this catching stance doesn't look good, try this, try this, try it, or this throwing thing doesn't work. He knows to be like, I'm going to look at your shoulder. Because, oh, there it is. Okay, your shoulder doesn't rotate how it needs to throw a ball like this. Therefore, I'm going to strategically work around it until we can make that work how we need it to then do this thing well. Having that as a coach is huge. So if you're a jiu-jitsu coach and your person's getting tapped out left and right because whatever, and you're just like, try this, try these age-old techniques that I'm regurgitating, and they're not working because you're just throwing shit at the wall and hoping it sticks. Get to the person, look at them, be like, oh, this is why. Okay, so now we're going to work around and then come back to it. Boom. And if I'm on like the sideline, if I was like a jiu-jitsu caddy, I don't know if they make those, but I would be like, let's find the person's FRA side. And I'm just looking like, oh, their IR 0, go for their hip. And I'm just going for your hip all day. Like, I'm not looking at your face, your neck. I'm not trying to choke you. I'm going for your hip because I know you have nothing there. And I give you a little tweak, you're done. Right. And so it's almost strategic on the side too. Like if you know someone, like if they're warming up and you see their shoulder line go here, like, oh, mine. Right.
Yeah.
And so, and too, unless you're that jiu-jitsu person that is just, whoa, you're ready to go. You're like, well, no idea how to attack this person. I'm just going to have to
Hunter.
No idea. And you can't make him tired because he does zone 2 forever. So you're never going to You're just going to pull him into a pretzel and he's going to be like,
I told him if or when we ever roll, I'm just going to choke him because that's my only option.
Yeah. Just stab him. It's like, whoa, knife fight. Like, what? That's all I could do. I couldn't even choke you.
Oh, sorry.
But, exactly. That's, huge. So that was awesome. That was a really, really good explanation and application to this, this weird training that we do for our people. And yeah, so let's move on from that and let's talk about our final thing here. When it's your kind of movement, your passion, as I reached out to you almost originally to talk about solely, but obviously we have so much more value to talk about, is this strong is feminine movement issue. And it came from the last talk we had. And what resonated with me is how badass of a female you wanted to be, why you kind of went into jiu-jitsu, and also the ability for females to hold their own in a sense in male-dominated jobs, occupations, things like that. You referenced someone coming in for you for training, being small, little, tiny female, and being like, how the hell are you going to help me? And now anyone who's walked in with you knows how much you can help them. But let's kind of talk about that. I think that's really, really important for me because I work with so many female athletes from the high school level, and I've had plenty of conversations with females and parents, even first observing their words and being like, make sure you watch out because so-and-so is looking at themselves in the mirror a little more often lately. They're having this conversation, or this group of girls in school, or this clique is handling them. I've been lucky enough to have figured something out where a lot of my people do not fear the bulky. They realize it's not a real thing. They play better. They're more confident in their sport. They get hurt less, and the confidence has transcended into their daily lives. And now they're living. And it's not to be like, boys drool, go to Jupiter and get stupider thing, right? It's not this anti-guy thing. It's this very, very important topic that cannot be overlooked, and it cannot be understated of how it actually exists. And that's why I love working with females more often than, like, dudes are too easy. Like, there's like, okay, I was like, whatever, here, pick a weight, we'll do it, work hard. But, and it's not to say that guys don't go through these things too. I can name a few off the top of my head that training wasn't the training session. It was this confidence building for them to go do well in school, to show up to class, to talk to the girl or whatever, which then I asked them for tips and tricks. And it was like, oh, so you talked to the girl? How'd you do it? Like, but I just think it's really awesome that you do it. And obviously you're a hell of a role model for that. So
Thanks, Colin. Yeah, like I mentioned, so having grown up in martial arts, I think was already a huge thing for me because again, going back to that conversation that ended up being, it's like for sure more of a blessing than a curse of having that sort of toughness and things like that. I was lucky enough that the extended bleeding for me as a kid was like calling me a goody goody, and it didn't really bother me. It's like, okay, yeah, whatever. But just having self-defense for women is huge and totally underrated. And it's something that I was really fortunate that I think a 5-year-old in that little kid's class, the owner of our gym had talked to us and just had a conversation with us about how we carry ourselves and how that makes all the difference in the world as to whether or not you're going to be like more likely to be a victim to something, right? And it's something that some people get really upset about the conversation, like, well, just because you don't carry yourself like that doesn't mean you should get attacked. Absolutely not. Like, no one should get attacked. Reality is shit happens, and there are crazy people are going to do it regardless, right? And it's not necessarily a matter of just like, oh, we need to educate them more. It's like, no, people have issues, and that's just, it's a very kind of harsh reality. And so that was something that resonated with me of like, I need to carry myself with confidence, right? And I need to make sure that, because actually even like I would walk, it was only maybe a mile, but I would walk from my school to the karate school because I would like get out of school. I'd go to actually my aunt and business right there as well. I'd go there, do homework for a couple hours, and then I'd go across the street and I'd go to work. And then I would teach for however many hours and then go home at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, whatever, do homework. Yeah. Again, I'm not a big human being. I'm like I said, bigger now than I was, but that's on purpose. That was like intentional adding for jujitsu and whatever. But it's like, in the end, I'm still a 5'3" female. And it's kind of like, 14, 15, 16, and walking down the street. And it's not very far. It's like a fairly busy, but at the same time, it's like something that I had in the back of my mind of like, how I carry myself makes a difference. But part of that is being able to have the confidence, right? Because if shit's gonna go wrong, it's because like it's people, they're less likely to choose you if they're like, oh, that person's gonna put up a fight versus, oh, that person's just gonna collapse and come willingly, right? Because they're terrified, which anyone would be terrified in that situation. But if how I can carry myself with confidence makes a difference, I'm gonna make sure that's the thing. So step one. And so I think martial arts for women in general already brings up that confidence level. And not to necessarily say like it's not going to happen or this and that, but I've been fortunate that like even having done almost my entire life, like I've never been in a fight aside from like actually in the ring Muay Thai fights when I was doing Muay Thai. But other than that, nothing, and I'm very grateful for that. And I hope that doesn't happen. But it's something that even still when I'm in places, like traveling or what have you, like I'm very much more aware of my surroundings and how I carry myself to make sure like, I need to make sure that I'm not being an idiot right now. And that I'm not walking down the street just staring at my phone, right? And so it's one of those things that like when I was doing jiu-jitsu, I just fell that much more in love with like just the martial arts lifestyle and having that confidence. But it's something that I realized that a ton of women are like, hell no, I can't do jujitsu. Like I am scared. I don't deal well with sweat. I'm going to get hurt. Like I'm not capable of doing that. And so when I used to coach, I initially started coaching, the kids classes and then different adult classes. And I was working as a program director at my jiu-jitsu school. And so I would talk to the moms, like the moms would come hang out, chat while the kids are training, what have you, if I was at the front desk. And I would always be the one like trying to convince them to train. And they're like, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. No way. And then I actually started a women's jiu-jitsu class. And it's funny because I would enjoy it because for me, it was actually a more challenging mindset shift because having already grown up in martial arts, it was never strange for me to train with guys. Mm-hmm. And so having that awkwardness, like jiu-jitsu, you get put in strange positions, like people's legs are wrapped around you. You've got sweaty man on top of you, like, and it's like, when you think about it, it's like kind of gross. Someone else's sweat like drips in your eye and you're just like, that was disgusting, whatever it is. But for me, like in terms of like it being awkward, have that. And so to think about like a female who's never done anything like this in her life to then immediately go to train with guys and be put in all these strange positions is weird, right? And so I've had to be like, oh yeah, I can understand how that would be kind of strange, even though I didn't have that.
Sure.
So I actually started a women's class. That way there was an environment where a female teaching and they're training with other females. And it's just wild. Let me just tell you, it is wildly different when you get to train just solely a group of females and there's no men around. It is funny. But it's one of those things that like, it grew to be my favorite class to teach. Like, you know, a lot of times women have this thing that they're apologizing all the time. Like, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. And it's just like, stop being sorry. And so I always took a lot of joy in like when I would teach and I would be demonstrating on someone. And it's like, the goal is to make your opponent uncomfortable, right? Like it's not supposed to be enjoyable necessarily. And so I'd be teaching and like holding someone in this position. And then I would tell like all the ladies sitting there, like, you see the face that they're making right now? They're like, you want that. So when they make that, do not say, I'm sorry. Be like, yes, it's awesome, you know, because that's what. And so being able to enjoy all of these things and then have women come later, like, you know, have her a couple months down the line, but like, Christina, I have never been able to do a push-up before in my entire life, like a real push-up. And now I can. And I'm like, you know, or I never thought I would be capable of doing this. And I never thought I would love jiu-jitsu, and I love this. Like, I feel so good. And I feel like women started discovering this strength that they didn't know they had. And I think that's kind of the message, is that we all have it there. It's just a matter of putting yourself in a situation where you can discover it yourself and allow it to empower you. Mm-hmm. Because like I said, it's one of those things, like jiu-jitsu is one of those that was originally came up for the smaller person to be able to defeat someone larger using technique and using leverage. And so actually, like, a lot, if you watch female, like high level jiu-jitsu females, it's mind blowing how technical they are. And they typically move a little bit better too, but they just have to be that much more technical, because a lot of us either don't have the size or strength to match the guys or whatever it is. So all we have is that technique as our, and so like being able to discover that and then realize, like, me by 50 pounds and I just tapped them out. And you're like, never aside from that would you have ever thought, like, oh yeah, I could beat that guy, or I could be even that, you know, that beat that bigger female. And all of a sudden you can, like, it's a very empowering thing to then discover, like, holy shit, I am strong. And where did that come from? And the reality is like, you didn't just become strong. Like, you've had it, you just didn't know, and you needed to be put in the right situation for that to flourish and for you to recognize that for yourself, step one. And then step two, like I mentioned in episode 1, that, you know, I've luckily, because I've done martial arts most of my whole life, like I haven't had the issues of being confident or things like that, but adding strength to what I was already doing, and then being able to realize, holy crap, I am way stronger, or, oh, look, my body changed a little bit, you know, because I wasn't one that was like, you know, this was almost 9 years ago when I started jiu-jitsu. And at the time, I remember needing to get smaller. I need lighter. And that was always the thing. I was like, no, I should be lighter. I should be lighter. I'm like 5'3". I should be lighter. And it's just combination of like, well, you're small, so you shouldn't weigh that much. And so in my brain back then, I was always like, okay, try to, like, oh, look, I'm getting lighter. Oh, yes, I'm 114 pounds today. Hell yeah. I laugh now because now I'm like 127 pounds. And it's like, wow, I've got 13 pounds heavier. But it's like intentional, right? And so it's one of those things that I was like, okay. Then I started strength training. And I had told, because of like, there's weight classes in jiu-jitsu when you compete, I actually couldn't get heavier to a point. I was like, I can't be any heavier than maybe 117 because I'll still have to cut weight, because with a gi on, I could be 118 pounds or less. And so I was like, you know, I want to get stronger, but I can't necessarily add weight. And so my coach was like, cool. And so he was very good in his programming, in that, like, I just got really strong. And I noticed like my body started to change. I remember actually, it was really funny. There was one day that I walked into my office at jiu-jitsu, and there's like this tiny little mirror on the wall. And I walked in, and like, you get used to seeing yourself, right? And I caught a glimpse, and I was like, what the hell is that? And I like looked, and I had like a tiny little trap, and I was like, when did I get trapped? Like, what is that? Like, when did that line get there? I have no idea what this is. But so it started to be like, oh, this is pretty cool. And like, I felt like better in my body than I ever had, and having that strength. And then people that I was rolling with were like, dude, you're getting stronger. Like, you're getting even harder to deal with than you were before. And having that sort of, and that confidence, like you said, that your female athletes that you've worked with, that they start to lift a little and they lift a little, and then all of a sudden they're playing better and they're sleeping better and they're just living better because now they have this confidence. That's it. That's what I want all women to realize, is that you have that ability to be able to do that, whether that's through martial arts training, whether that's through strength training. And yeah, like getting away from this idea that like the second that I lift a weight, I'm going to look like a guy and I'm going to be big and ripped and whatever. Like, I had to intentionally work my ass off and stuff my face to try to gain weight, because it got to a point where actually it was kind of a cool tipping point. Like I said, what initially was, you do, okay, can I get a little lighter? Can I get a little lighter? Can I get a little lighter? And then I was like, okay, try to get and like maintain 114, which was hard to do. And I did get a whole lot stronger, and I stayed at the weight that I compete. And then one day in competition, it was like, I cut weight, I competed, and these girls I was competing against felt so strong to me. And I remember being frustrated, thinking like, I know I'm stronger than this girl. Like, why does she feel so hard to deal with? And then I realized, like, I wonder if it's because I'm cutting all this weight to compete. And at the time, it was garbage weight cutting. Like, that's not something that I had help with or anything. And I would just like, it was a terrible weight cut process the week of the tournament, like eating 2 Lara bars a day and like just, you know, it was bad. It was all bad. I do not recommend it. And luckily people are smarter about this now. But it got to a point where like I had this conversation with PJ, and he's like, well, why don't, like, the next tournament, compete at your natural body weight, just see what happens. I was like, okay. So it was like, the next tournament was in Las Vegas, and I didn't cut weight. And actually I had full meals all week, yada, yada. The morning of the tournament, like, I had a full breakfast, I had a protein shake, and I was still under, like, that's how far under at because the next weight class was 118 to 129. Oh, wow. And at the time I was walking around like 117. I weighed in at 122 and a half pounds. And again, the top of the weight class, and that was with my gi on and everything, top of the weight class was 129. And there were girls that were cutting from heavier than that to be in that weight. Yeah. So I ended up rolling against some chicks who were like cutting down from, you know, maybe like 130s, maybe even up to 140. And I won. Like, I won the tournament, and I felt stronger than everybody I rolled with. And I was like, how is this possible? I gave up all this weight, but I've been training intelligently, fueled properly, and I just smashed the division, and it was awesome. And so literally I thought, all right, well, I'm never cutting weight again. Let's go on a weight gain mission. Yeah. And let's try to add some mass. That way I'm actually like properly in the division. And even so, it was like, okay, let's try to get to 124 or 125 solid. That way, once I put a gi on, I'll be 129. Perfect. I'll be right at the top of the weight class. It was so hard. And that's one thing, like, I want women to realize, is that when you strength train, that doesn't immediately mean that you're gaining weight or that you're being bulky or anything like that. Like, yes, your body's going to change, but I promise you it's going to change in ways you're probably going to appreciate, to just recognize the strength and the capacity that your body has to do all of these things. And it's one of those things that, yeah, I was eating, I don't even know. I felt like I was just eating all day, every day, like meal, protein shake, train, protein shake, train again, another meal, more food. And I got so tired of it. I topped off at 122 pounds and was like, I'm done. I'm heavy enough. I'm just going to get strong as shit at 122 pounds, and then I'll give up a few pounds. I don't even care. And so I stopped. I was over all of that. And again, like I said, like that confidence and that ability to just do whatever I wanted transcended not just like to everything, like having that confidence to just do what it is that I wanted with my life or with my body or whatever it was. Is you've now pushed yourself to these limits that maybe you thought you weren't capable of passing before. And you realize, like, I don't have any limits. Whatever limits that I have are of my own mindset. And if you can have that mindset shift to recognize, like, oh, I've pushed myself harder than this before. Like, well, if I can do that in the weight room, what does that mean I can do outside of the weight room with that mentality, right? And so that is kind of the idea that, like, being and like, it originally started actually as fierce, and that you can be a strong woman and you're still feminine. It doesn't make you any less feminine to be strong. And I think that was something that I teased in the last episode of my mom wanting a girly girl. That's just not what she got. And I didn't care about any of it till high school. And actually, it wasn't until I started dating to like my now husband, because we started dating when I was in high school, that was when I was like, oh, maybe I should like, you know, clean up a bit, whatever. Like, not that I needed to, but I wanted to. And, you know, it was this idea that like, no, I do martial arts and I'm strong and like, I don't care. I don't need to be like, I actually would always be super annoyed by like popular like cheerleaders, because they were just not the kind of people that I wanted to be. And so I just like shoved it off even more. And then I was like, man, it's kind of nice to get dressed up and like be cute and, you know, actually blow dry my hair for once and, you know, whatever else. And it was this kind of acceptance of like, oh, well, I can be strong and I can do martial arts and do all these things, but I can be at the same time. So I think there's this other connotation that women in martial arts are super butch, and you're just like, oh, but you know, and some women are, and like that's kind of the beauty of it, is just like there's so many people and so many different kinds of women who train jiu-jitsu who maybe are a little bit more like whatever's traditionally masculine, or there are women who are like super girly. There's this thing that's actually been going around Instagram. I don't know if you've seen any of them. I forget what the challenge is called, but it's like some TikTok thing that people have been doing. And actually I just saw one yesterday with a bunch of black belt females that was like, you know, they're putting their gi on and then they start putting on their belts and they're like, no. And then they put the belt in front of the camera. And then when it comes back, they're like dressed up and like makeup done or done pretty and stuff. And it's like, look, I'm a badass jiu-jitsu black belt, but I'm also like super feminine and I like to get dressed up and like, you know, be like, you know, more feminine. And it's just to help women to realize that like they can embrace their strength and not be perceived as masculine or anything like that, but that strength again is just going to transcend to all the other aspects of their life, and they can still be super feminine, be a badass. And that's why I still, even though I don't put that message out like say on social media and stuff as much anymore, I still always tag it because I think it's important, like that strong is feminine and you don't have to believe otherwise.
Yep. No, that's awesome. That's everything I wanted to hear, everything I wanted my, you know, anyone listening to this or watching this to hear, how important that is, and just what it can do for everything in your life. Just being comfortable. It talks back to episode 1 when it's just like, there's something pulling you in a direction and it's this little tiny voice and you should probably listen to it. Whether the people who are also doing it are supporting you and then there's this other crowd, or if it's your family and friends, you know, there's something really good about listening to who you really are. And then when you figure it out, when you get put into that, whatever it is, and it doesn't have to be jiu-jitsu. I think martial arts has this natural tendency to have that badassery to help. Mm-hmm. It's just some situation that shows you've always had this thing and it just brought it to the light, and then you just ride with it. So that's
absolutely
awesome. I hope everyone who's listening to this takes away a little bit of that, you know, females, males too, you know what I mean? It's everyone has a little bit.
Yeah, it is.
It's always been there. And it just has to be found. It'll take some time. You know, it doesn't get fixed either. It doesn't like, I need to dig down real deep, and, you know, it kind of comes naturally. So if you're not finding it right now, or if this podcast doesn't like, woo, I'm going to go like ask that person out or whatever. Like, no, it's probably not going to happen right away. It's going to take a little bit of time and it's going to move. So, this has been wonderful. I think that is a great time. Little do everyone know we've been on for like 3 hours, but this is awesome.
Everything's fine.
And then we can do it for hours more, but I will let you go back, get to your awesome new services coming out. And so we'll wrap it up like that. So if you're watching this, Apple and Spotify podcast is how you find it on the Move Well with McGee podcast. If you're listening on the podcast already, you can find the visual and some other links I'm going to throw up. I think Christina has a cool YouTube video where she kind of talks about the application with Jiu Jitsu and FRC with it. I'll link that with this on my website, and that's just movewellwithmcgee.teachable.com. So there's going to be many ways to view this content. And then, Christina, where can we find you? And what awesome goodies are coming out soon, as well as your online kin stretch that you can hop into?
Woo! Yeah. So Instagram, I'm at coach_Christina, and it's CH Christina. And then you can email me too if you have like more questions than just like DMing me, and it's a really obnoxious email because my name is in there way too many times, but it's just Christina at coach dash, not underscore, but coach dash ChristinaMarie.com. Again, Christina at coach dash ChristinaMarie.com if you want to email me. And yeah, in person, I work in Long Beach. I also teach pin stretch in Newport Beach. But that being said, I've also traveled to my old jiu-jitsu professor's school, like in Washington, to run like a kin stretch class up there for his students, which is really fun. So if you want to like bring me into your jiu-jitsu school to share some of this or take your students through a class, like I'm more than happy to do that. I really love teaching this work, obviously. And when I get to combine this work with jiu-jitsu, it gets me even more excited because it's just two things that I'm incredibly passionate about. And then in terms of online training, I actually, as of just the last 8 weeks, I've been running live Zoom classes online, which has been a thing. I am going to be adjusting the schedule kind of moving forward starting in June. But beginning in June, those are going to be paid classes that are going to be $20 per class to drop in. That way you have the account actually showing up at a specific time to train with me live. Right now, for sure, keeping the Wednesday time slot, that's going to be 12 p.m. Pacific time to 1:30 p.m. Pacific on Wednesdays. And then I'm actually in the process of building a platform to have an online kin stretch where you'll have pre-recorded classes available to you. At the moment, it's going to be run through a private Facebook group, and it'll just be a monthly PayPal subscription. Funny fact, sorry, I've been using my hands to talk so much that my Garmin thinks I've just walked 2,260 steps today when I've just been sitting on this seat for the last 2.5 hours. Anyway, it just buzzed at me and I was like, really? But yeah, so that's going to be through a private Facebook group for now. Eventually it will just be run through my website, but it's still in the works. So for now, you will need a Facebook account to do that, but it'll be a private Facebook group. The classes will be there available for you. You'll have a new one will go up every 2 weeks, and they'll actually be up for a total of 4 weeks each class. To repeat as many times as you want. You'll be able to ask questions in that group. And we just want to, my goal is to build a community to help educate more people worldwide who maybe don't have access to this work nearby them, and go from there. So I'm hoping if I can keep my act together that by next week, by June 1, it'll be ready. And then if not, shortly after that, then that launch will happen. And it's going to be awesome. I'm excited.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I'm going to push as many people in that direction as I can. And hopefully get this, I'm trying to figure out like my podcast scheduling and stuff, but get this out in an appropriate time. That way it helps feed the boost and you get that awesome initial wave that hopefully will be a tidal wave for you because you deserve it.
Thanks,
and
Ben.
everyone needs to go here with you as well. I will have all those things linked because she said Christina a lot, and to decipher where and when to use the word Christina will be in text form. So you can hear.
You forgot my name.
Yeah, it's Christina with a CH. And then so everything on the website will be in the podcast stuff. You know where to find Christina, and if you're in California and the local area, please go see her. She is well worth your time and going to be a great time. She will laugh. She's not as intimidating as she seems.
Thanks so much, Colin. This has been really fun. Like, it's going to be good, but I just, I should have known because I know you and I know how great you are. And so it's been awesome to share this time with you. So thanks for having me on also.
No, thank you for coming on. I same feelings. Like, always going to be a good time, but then it's always better than what I expected. And we could have been here until 8 p.m., I feel like. So I will let you go. I will let everyone else go.
All right, man.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Christina, for coming on. Until next time.